Introduction to Golang programming. And I'll be the host for the session. And along with me, Varshini will be co-hosting the session. Yeah. So let's first start with what all you will be learning during the session. So we'll first start with variables, strings and numbers, printing and formatting strings, loops, booleans and conditionals, and how we'll be using functions in Golang. So before we start, I'd like to give you a disclaimer. We all know that it takes quite a lot of time to pick up a new programming language and learn it thoroughly, especially the syntax and what each keyword does. So, what I'd be promising you through this session would be to get you started with the language so that you can pick it up from here and take it forward and learn it based on the use case that you have. So, if you're looking to build a CLI tool, you can take that path. So, you'll be ready with all the prerequisites of syntax that you'll need for that. So, it's just to get you started with the basics of Golang. So some of you might have already learned Java, C++, C in school or in college, and you might as well have learned Python. So why learn Golang? Like it could be just another programming language in the bunch of programming languages that we already have. Does it have something different or exclusive for itself? Is the question we're going to answer. So I started learning Golang during one of my internships. And I also realized that there is a need for Golang developers in the industry during that time. But is that reason convincingly enough to learn a new language just because there's demand? Or do we also have something exclusive to Golang itself? So as you can see, these are some of the features of Golang, and I'll be going through it very briefly. So we all know this concept called multi-threading. What happens in this is multiple threads are created during program execution, and each thread is responsible for some task. So for example, if you're watching YouTube, you could also comment during the same time. You can run a different video. You can upload your own content on YouTube, all of this at once. So this is like the simplest form of how multi-threading works. And how is this related to Golang? So there's something called multi-core concurrency support. Concurrency is nothing but running tasks parallelly or parallel execution of tasks. And we do have some legacy programming languages that can do this well, like Java and C++. But the only drawbacks are that they have a complex code and syntax that does this, and they run heavy on the system. They're also pretty expensive when it comes to multi-core concurrency support and are slow. But on the other hand, we have Golang that is designed to run on multiple cores and is built to support concurrency. So this was one of the major use cases taken by Google to develop Golang. So I forgot to mention during the initial part of the session itself that Golang is a programming language built by mainly 3 engineers from Google. And this was first released in 2007, and the open source version of it was released in 2009, which was made available for everyone. Now let's move on. So this was one of the main use cases of Go. For like we use it for high performant applications and the applications or systems that need to be scaled and distributed. So some of the characteristics of Go are that it has a very simple syntax, just like Python has. And the syntax can be mostly related to C language. It also has very fast build time, and it can start up and run quickly too. And it uses fewer resources like CPU, processor, RAM, all of that. Now let's get started. Enough of theory about the background history of Golang. So can someone unmute, just in case the chat box is not working, can someone unmute and answer what is the first small program that we always start off with whenever we learn a new language? This is like the most common program, and this is the first one we use in any programming language that we learn. And it also gives us a sense of achievement when we do this little piece of code. Yeah, I think I heard an answer. I
Hello
think I
all.
heard. Yeah, perfect. Bingo. That's the answer. So it's the Hello World program. And there are a lot of memes associated with this. So every time a beginner programmer of any language executes this, they have this sense of satisfaction. So let's also get that done. Since most of you might not have installed Golang and all that, you can try something called the Go Playground and you can execute your codes here. Just in case you're learning, you want to try out things, you can use the Go Playground. Just put in your code and you can start running it here. But I will be using Microsoft's tool, which is VS Code for this session. So let's open up a new folder. So this is an empty folder. I'll first be creating a file and I'll call it main.co. I'll tell you why when we're going through the session. So first things first, to initialize our setup itself to run a Go program, everything in Go is considered as a package. So we'll first have to give a package name. So let's give it as package main. And next, let's run a Hello World program. Will it work if I just type print hello world? If it was Python, it definitely would. But in Go, we have a few formalities to abide by before we actually start coding. So we'll first have to create a function called main and then put in any code that we want to. So what the main function does is that it is like an entry point to our application. So when the program is executed, it will first look for the main function and execute whatever is inside the function. So it should be package main and main function inside that package. You could have more functions as well. We'll see how all that's done. But will it still function? There's one more thing that we'll need to add. There's something called FMT, which is format input output. So this with println will help us print the hello world program. So this is the right syntax. So yeah, let's see what the error is. Oh yeah, this should be given as a string because FMT is again a package. Like I said, Golang considers everything to be a package, and this one's also a package. Now let's run this one. I'll open up the terminal and you'll first have to check if you're in the directory where the file exists. And the command for it is go run and the file name, which is main.go. And yes, we finally got our Hello World program. So during this session, I'm not expecting all of you to, follow along with me because it will be tough. I will be presenting on one screen and you cannot type it down parallelly. So what I would advise you guys to do is to observe how different the syntax is in Golang with the programming language that you already know. So you'll get a good idea. And probably after the session or over the next weekend, you guys can go learn some more things about Golang. So firstly, it'll be nice if you could just follow along the session while I am doing things. Okay, so now we're done with our first task, which is to run the Hello World program. Now let's move on to the next one. So you can see that Golang always gives me an error whenever I remove something inside the function. That is because whenever you initialize or declare something in Golang, if it is not being used, it will always be considered as an error. So it could be a variable, it could be a package that you've imported. If you're not using it, it will show up an error. So we'll first move on to some of the basic concepts. We'll start with variables and strings and numbers. We'll see how they're declared in Golang. So now starting off, let's declare a simple string variable and we'll see the types of, all the ways in which this can be declared. So the first way would be to use the keyword var. So we're telling the system that this whatever's coming ahead is going to be a variable. Let's start with name one. And we are also giving it the data type of the variable. It's going to be string. And now we'll add a name. So let's say it's Arun. Now this is again giving me an error. Can someone tell me why we're getting this error?
We are not using it.
Yeah, because it's being declared but not used. So once we use it, only then the error message would go. It could be considered as a warning as well. Now let's see the other ways to declare a string. So now I'll take another name, which is name 2. Okay, and let's give it another name. Give it Levi. So this can also be done. You need not mention the data type. It will automatically declare it to be a string. And the third type is to not write var or anything. It's almost like the shorthand way of doing it. So it's name 3. We use a colon and an equal to, and we directly give the name. Okay. Now let's get rid of all these errors. To do that, let's just print all the variables that we have declared here. So I'll print name 1, comma, let's give it, okay, name 2, comma, name 3. So now we can execute this. I'll again do go run main.go. And here we have the 3 names being printed. So these are the 3 ways of declaring and using string variables in Go. Similarly, we can also see how it's done for the integers and floats as well in short, and we can move on to the next topic. Let me comment this out before I move on so that this is not getting executed while I'm executing the newer statements in the code. Now we can start for an integer variable. It's very similar for integers as well. We'll do var, we'll give it as num1, and we'll also give the system the data type and the number that we want. Similarly, we can also declare another variable, not give it the type, but it will automatically choose the type. And the last type of doing this would be num3, and let's give it a random integer. Now let's uh, print all of this again. Num1, num2, and num3. Oh yeah, we forgot to add the colon. Yes. So now if you can check, it has been declared as an int. Similarly for num2, even there we hadn't specified that it's an integer. Now we can execute this and we'll get the results here. Similarly for float, you just have to change the type that's being used, float, and give it like a larger value. And float has another condition. You'll have to specify if it's a 32-bit float or a 64-bit float. So yeah, you can give something like that. Yes. Okay, we'll have to increase the range a little bit more for it to, okay. And num2 also could be declared as a float. And yeah, fine. Similarly, you can also get your float printed. And let's print these two as well. We get these values. Now we know how to declare variables and how to use them as well and how to print them, that is. Let's move on to some string formatting and all that. So that could also be very useful when you first start off with learning a new programming language. So we'll start with some string formatting. Uh, can someone tell me the difference between this line of code and this line of code.
Println will go to a new line and print will be a space.
Yeah, that's right. So print will not add another next line while you print this, but print ln will give you an will add an dash n character which will set it to a next line. We'll see how this executes. So like we'd guessed, Keto and hello are executed together. To change this, you could either use print ln here and then, okay, wait, let me clear the terminal for you so this is more visible. You could either do that to get these printed in two separate lines, or you could add a /n character to do the same. That will also again append a new line character to the string. Next, let's learn how to format strings. So for this, what we would be doing is we'd be using again something called format specifiers here. So for this purpose, let's use printf and not printl or println or print. So what printf does is, you'll be seeing it shortly. So we write my name is and give it percentage v, which stands for percentage var. Percentage is called as format specifier. And I am from Bangalore. So here, let's initialize two variables again in shorthand notation. So let me give name as Kirtana and the place I come from as Goa. And I'll be removing this. Let's again add percentage %v as the format specifier. So I'll be adding name here and place. So now what will happen? Can someone tell me what could happen now? Or I'll tell it. This is very obvious because name, this thing will be replaced by name and this format specifier will be replaced by place. And this will be taken in order. So if you put place here and name here, it'll first display the place and then the name. Let's execute this and check out what happens. So yeah, we have what we expected, but it's in the same line as the next prompt. So let's also add a new line character and execute this again. Okay, just a minute. Yeah, this should do. So we can see that it says, my name is Kirtana and I'm from Goa. So this is one way of doing it. You could also use something called percentage %q to display quotes, percentage %t to give you the type of variable it is instead of this percentage %v. And okay, let's try percentage %t this time. Percentage, okay. The var type is, let's give it percentage %t and name. So let's see if we get the percentage, if we get the name of it. Okay, there's something with this from Goa. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So we get the var type is string. So you could get the type of any variable that you've used. Let me clear this so you could see the terminal more clearly. Now let's move on to our next concept, which is loops. Most of you would have learned how loops work in different programming languages, but here we'll be primarily learning how for loop works. So some of the main purposes of using loops is to iterate through something, either a variable or a list, or to get a range of values. There are different use cases. But now, one thing about Golang that differentiates it from the other languages is that for loops in Golang can also be used as while loops at the same time. So let's see how that's done. We'll first use for loops to just perform how for loops usually function. So for loop. So this is just like any other loop that you would use. So it's going to be for I, and we are declaring and initializing the variable I less than 5 semicolon and I plus plus. So what this would basically do is that it would start from variable I 0. It will go on incrementing this value up to the point where I reaches less than 5. So it will stop at 4. Let's give this a try. Let's print the I values to know if that works. Let's do go run main.go. So yes, as we'd anticipated, it's giving us 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. What would we change for it to give us the value 5 as well? Can someone answer this? I want this loop to print the value 5 as well with just one modification. Can someone tell me how
Equal to
this is
sign.
done? Yeah, so we could use less than or equal to do this. So let's save this. So as we can see, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if we want to print it from 1 to 5, then we'll change the range. That's it. And as we can see, we're printing it from 1 to 5. So this is how a simple for loop works. But how do we make this work like a while loop? Let's see that now. So it's going to be 1 second. Yeah. So it's going to be for as a while loop. Okay. So for this, what we'd be doing is that we'll first initialize a variable that would be used for iteration. Let's call it x. X will be initialized to 0. And let's start with x less than 5 as the condition it should meet, just like we would do for a while loop. We'll give it a statement. So whenever the statement is true, the loop will continue executing until the statement turns false. So yeah. Similarly, we'll print the x value. And another thing that we'll have to do that we usually do in while loop is that we will increment the value with every iteration. So we start with x equals 0. It comes into this loop. It checks if x is less than 5 and executes this. 0 is less than 5, so x will be printed as 0. X plus plus happens and x is incremented to 1. 1 is less than 5 increments similarly until 4. So when it's incremented to 5, it's not true and the loop exits. So let's run this and check if we're getting the values that we're expecting. So yes, we're getting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me clear the terminal for you and execute it again so you get a better view of it. So these are the values we're getting. So this is how you use a while loop using the for keyword in Golang. Similarly, you could also use it to iterate through a list that you have. So let's see how arrays are declared in Golang. So let's take an example of a string array. Let's comment the previous code out. Okay. Now let's declare a new array called names and we'll initialize it. So let's see the syntax of how this is done. So we add square braces, we add the type of array, and then we start filling values. So let's fill it with some sample names. Okay, let's fill it with a few more names. That's it. That should do. So we have an array of 4 elements here. And yeah, Okay, I made a mistake here. This should not be curved braces. This should be curly braces instead to show that it is an array. And this is showing an error because you've declared it and have not used it. So once you use it, uh, the error would vanish. Now let's do println again to see the entire list at once. Okay, so if we execute this, we'd be able to see the entire list, I mean, entire array as an array itself. So it has Divya, Vinay, Kiran, and Arun. But what if we want to access elements singly and print them down one by one? For in that case, we'd be using a for loop. So let's see how that is done. So for I colon equal to 0, so we're initializing it to 0 because the first element or the index of the first element would be 0. And let's do I less than length of names. So this is to show that, you know, not to show. This is to implement that this array iterates only up to the length of elements. So it goes till the last element. So this will have the value 4 and till the point where I is less than 4, this for loop will be executed. And the last part, which is I plus plus. So let's again print these values one by one and probably say hello and then the name of the person. So it will be names and I. Okay. Oh yeah, forgot to add a semicolon here. That's why it's giving me an error. Now once we save this, let's run this and check if all the names are being printed one by one. So it says hello Divya, hello Vinay, as expected. So now what if we want to access elements singly but not through a loop, and we just want to retrieve one element from the string? Just like other programming languages, we would simply use the index of the element to do that. So it would be print ln, and then let's give it names, and we'll just have to give the index value of it. Say if I give 2, can someone tell me which name will be printed?
Kiran.
Yeah, that's right. So Kiran will be printed. So this is all about how loops are used in Golang. There are some other forms of loops where you also can use, like, you can retrieve the index value plus the value itself. So we won't go into the details of that, and we'll cover the other concepts so you know some basics of how Golang works and how it's different from the other languages. Now let's take a look at some of the conditional statements and how different it is from the other languages. It's mostly the same. It's going to be very similar to what you do in Python, Java, and the others. So let's declare a variable called age and let's give a value, say 15. And let's check if age is greater than 30. And if it's greater than 30, let's print a statement saying you are old. Otherwise, let's check if it's uh, maybe around, maybe it's greater than 40. And let's print out another line which says you're too old. Else, if it's none of these, then it should just say, okay, we didn't give the variable that it has to compare it with. Let's just give it, if it's none of these, let it just spell you're young. This is how it works with all the other languages, right? Okay, so now let's see. according to what we have conditioned it to work, it should give us the statement that you're young. But let's see what it executes. Yeah, it says you're young. But what if I change this to age less than 10? Can someone tell me what it would give me? I'm sorry that you guys are not able to use the chat box and some of you might be shy to, speak up. So any of you could just unmute and tell me what it could give me.
You're old.
Yeah, let's check that then. Yes, that's right. So this is how if condition is used in Golang. And we could also use if conditions inside a loop like we do in other languages as well. So we can move on to the next topic now, which is functions. And that would be the last topic for today, after which you guys will have to attempt a fun quiz. So let's start with functions now. We already know we have one function inside this uh, source code, which is main function. And I told you that it is like the entry point to the application. So to add newer functions, we should initialize and set up those functions above this main and call it from within this function. So let's say we type a function, say hello, and I'll also show you how to pass arguments inside the function. So let's call it name, and the variable type that it would take would be string. So let's print a value saying printf hello, and the person's name it receives. Okay. Along with this, let it also give a new line character. So the next line is appended to a new line. And let's give the variable that it should pick to be as name. So this will be replaced by the name that is sent into this function. And this function should be called from within the main function. So let's execute this part, say hello, and let's give it a name. Say, yeah, Sharat. Next, uh, let's add another function called say bye and let it also have the name as an argument. And let's print. So we could have as many functions as we want, just like we do in any other programming language. So let it say goodbye and a new line character. Okay. So let it say bye to Varun. So can someone tell me what would be the output when we execute this file or when we run this file?
Hello, Sarath,
Hello,
and bye,
Sarath,
Varun.
and goodbye, Varun.
Sorry.
Hello, Sarath, and bye, Varun.
Okay, that's right. It's goodbye Varun, by the way. So let's run the file. So let's go run main.co and it says hello Sharit and goodbye Varun. So this is how uh, we create functions, and every function that's created would be called from within the main function. So I think this is a good point to wind up the session for today. And I just like to add a few points before the test itself. So I forgot to mention that Golang is a compiled language and is not an interpreted language like Python. So what's the difference between compiled language and an interpreted language? So what happens in a compiled language is that the code is first converted to machine level code and then the processor executes it. While in the case of interpreted language, it's executed directly. So compiled languages take lesser time to run when compared to interpreted languages. And when you're using VS Code to work with Golang, it's advised or it'll be useful if you guys can install the Go extension. So it'll provide you some syntax prompts, and it'll also help you highlight the errors that you have in code and all of that. And if you have any doubts, you can reach out to me through the meeting channel that we have now or through the WhatsApp group that we've already created. So now we can start. Okay, before we leave or before we start taking the quiz, I'll share with you one of the Git repositories that I have. It's called Learning Golang. And in that repository, I have I used to log everything that I learned during my days of Golang. So you can go through each chapter and learn whatever you want, and it's very beginner friendly.